Okay, let's talk about factoring polynomials for a minute. It's good to know that there are different methods. So the first method is called GCF, that's the greatest common factor, and I would say you should always try to factor out the greatest common factor if the problem has one. Second method is called a difference of squares. It has three characteristics or criteria, two terms only, subtraction problem, and both of the terms have to be perfect squares. Here's an example, x squared minus 16. Notice two terms, subtraction problem, both terms are perfect squares. This factors like that. The first set of parentheses is what is it that makes x squared? In other words, what times itself equals x squared. The next one is what multiplies together to be 16. Well, that's 4. So it looks like that. Next method is dealing with trinomials, that is polynomials that have three terms, and you use the guess and check method. Fourth method is grouping, and you do that when something has four terms. I have examples of this on my site, but you could also look those up just on YouTube in general for some examples of how to do those. Last but not least is the sum or difference of cubes, and these are the formulas for those. Here's an example here, x cubed minus 8. So how is this different than this? Well, notice that these terms are perfect cubes instead of perfect squares. So if these are perfect cubes, you have a small set of parentheses and then a longer one. The first slot here is what times itself three times that equals this. Well, x times x times x is x cubed. What goes here is what times itself three times equals 8. Well, that's 2 times 2 times 2. This sign is always the same as that. This term is that one squared. This term is this times this, but this sign is always the opposite of that. And the last term is that term squared. And notice the last term is always a plus sign up here. And in the formulas, this sign, this here is always the opposite of whatever you put here. So this is plus because this is plus, this is minus because this is minus, this is plus because it's the opposite of that, and this is minus because that's the opposite of this, but they both end in plus or positive. Well, that's just a quick rundown of the methods. I think you should, if you're an Algebra 2 student or even Algebra 1 student, it's good to have these things down rock solid, like the back of your hand. Greatest common factor. So when you're factoring something, you should be able to quickly, in your head, run down this list so that you can pick out which method should you use on the problem. And sometimes you'll use more than one method. I mean, there are times when you use two methods, you might even use three. But you always try to do this first, then you check for this, then you check for this, all the way down. You check each one of those in your brain and figure out which method you should use. Kind of like when you're working on a project at home and you're figuring out whether you should use a hammer, a screwdriver, or a wrench. Kind of like that. Every problem needs a specific method that you should use. So know these well. And like I said, there are videos on my channel for each one of these specific things. Greatest common factor, difference of squares, all the way down. Every single one of these. If you look around, you can find examples of this on the internet, on my site, or on another YouTube channel. Blessings.